morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. Today, I have a very special guest. I have Mr. Cris Liban. He is the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Los Angeles Metropolitan Transit Authority, also known as LA Metro. Welcome to the show, Cris. I'm so excited to have you today.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you so much for inviting me here, and for us to talk about what we do here in LA Metro and what I do here in the region. So thank you.
You guys are the future of transportation. And I don't say that lightly. You guys are doing a lot for sustainability, a lot for social justice, a lot for the transportation of people.
Yep.
But I want to start with a paper you wrote where I actually have to look it up real quick. The transportation chapter of the National Climate Assessment. That's huge. That's gigantic.
Yep. Yeah, well, it's not completely written yet. We have written parts of it where actually, in the first 8 months of a 3-year process, we have a long ways to go. And, just for those who don't know what the National Climate Assessment is, the United States Congress, through the Office of the President of the United States, had actually mandated that every single 4 years, that there's an assessment of the impacts of climate in everything that we do here in the United States, and transportation is an integral part of, the societal impacts or impacted items of society here in the U.S. And so privileged enough to be part of that process alongside with 8 other co-authors of mine, so.
And I mean, and that is kind of huge. It's through the President of the United States. I mean, that's kind of big. So I know you're kind of like, oh, it's just a paper. No, that's huge. That's remarkable. And I love what you're doing.
Yep.
Back to what you're doing with the Metro.
Yep.
You guys are doing a lot for sustainability. And
Yep.
I've had the privilege of being part of your committee for a couple of years. And you are really focused on making the transportation better, making the electricity you're using renewable electricity.
Yep, definitely.
Which is huge. And, transforming your trains. So could you tell people what they can expect in, coming in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we've had this program essentially since 2007, 2008, around those years. It's been around 15 years. We have had over 180 different initiatives here in the agency.
That's huge.
Yeah, many of which have no comparison, anywhere else in the country, maybe in the world. And so it's very unique, to the Metro experience, and it's very unique to our riders and to our stakeholders here. And, going back to your point, in terms of the transportation system, we initially focused on making sure that our system, as well as our operations, become sustainable and resilient. We're past that. That was the focus of the last decade. Alongside with equity, before equity is actually being spoken about. And now, with the 2028 Olympics, we're essentially looking towards building newer infrastructure, $140 billion worth of infrastructure. That's not only climate safe, climate proof, resilient, sustainable, but also deals with environmental justice and all the issues of equity and inclusion, that transportation systems across the history of transportation here in this country, have been critiqued on, and reducing those issues actually.
Oh, and I love the fact you brought in equity. I mean, first of all, you guys have been doing this for much longer than most other cities, which is wonderful. Focusing on equity, equality, diversity, inclusion, very important, and people need to understand that. They need to, understand that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things you and I previously discussed was, I just finished up the conference down in Long Beach, the Advanced Clean Tech Act Expo. And I took Metro every single day from my hotel. And it was clean, it was fast, it was easy, much more cost effective than taking an Uber or taxi every day. More people need to just accept the fact that this is the way to go. This is how you should travel.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because I wish, the perception that people have of our system is actually like, the reality that, they would believe exists out there, right? I mean, you're a classic example. I go to parties sometimes and they say, oh, there is actually a subway system here in Los Angeles. Like, yeah, there's actually a subway system. There's a, a light rail system. We have an extensive, bus network. We actually suffer, Los Angeles in general, of essentially having this perception that, folks who are taking transit are the ones who actually can't afford vehicles to drive. That's not true.
No.
I take transit, as much as I can, actually pretty much every day that I go to work. And, I've been doing that, since I started working here in the agency. And, I have to admit, there's room for improvement, and part of, while the title of Chief Sustainability Officer might connote environmental function here in the organization, I look at, as a transit rider, I look at how can we improve our customer experience. How can we work together with the other departments here in the agency in terms of safety and security, for example.
Yeah.
In terms of marketing, in terms of planning our lines, in terms of reducing environmental impacts throughout the course of the construction and operating and maintenance of the projects, right? So there's a lot of those kinds of elements that I do. That hopefully as folks ride the system and try out the system, that they would somehow connect the dots, that this is not just really just riding. This is really improving the quality of life
Yes.
here in the city, by improving air quality, by increasing health and wellness through the exercise that we do in walking from your home to the next bus stop and whatnot, so yeah.
And I am a fan of Metro. I take the subway frequently, and one of the things I loved about it when I was going downtown all the time, I didn't have to worry about driving. I didn't have to worry about crazy people cutting me off in the car, the traffic jams. I could just get on board, not think, zone out, read a book, I pull out like my briefcase and do work. But you have that luxury of just not having to worry about all that stuff.
Yep.
You just do your work, you focus, and then at the end of the day, when you're going home and you're tired, maybe a little cranky, you just zone out and you go home.
Yep.
And I loved that. When I was, I did a brief period where I was driving downtown, and I would come home more stressed than when I left the office. So that's a health benefit right there.
Yeah, definitely. And and not only that, it's the really looking at the city a little bit more differently, and that's one aspect I just wanted to touch more on. I moved into Los Angeles back in 2003, and I came from Washington D.C. I drove all around the city there. In here, I drove a little bit. Actually, not 2000, 1993. So
I was going to say
I moved 10 years earlier than that. But the thing about it is that riding the bus and the train gives one perspective of the different neighborhoods, the different cultures, of the different, experiences, in many parts of our city. And, in the course of since 1993, the past 29 years, that I've been living here in LA, I've learned not only those communities, but more of the people in those communities. And this big city, this big region of 10 million people has become a very much smaller world for me, and makes my life and makes my job as CSO and advancing many of the things that we're doing here a lot more easy, because it's easy for me to put myself in their shoes.
Yeah.
Especially when talking about issues of environment, talking about the implications of some projects, of what that really means, in the economic viability and in the resiliency of that community, those kinds of things. It's easier for me to relate those because, in the past, almost 20 years, I've been riding, the bus and the train going to work. So.
Yeah. And, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because when I took it in Long Beach just to get to the conference, two gentlemen were on board and they asked me if I was a school teacher. And I said, no, but a huge compliment. Thank you for that. And he said, well, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm just a geologist, dirt and rocks. And we started engaging about pollution, contamination, renewable energy, why it's important to take transit.
Yep.
I would have never had that conversation if I were stuck in a car by myself,
Yep.
stuck in traffic.
Yep.
I met two awesome older gentlemen. They were wonderful. And, just some of the people that you can meet are pretty neat. I mean, I've run into friends where you just get on the subway and you're hopping on board. You're like, hey, so you can have a conversation. But I mean, I could babble about this forever, but
and it's transformational as well, because I'll relate to you one similar experience, and maybe not similar, but a conversation, because I volunteer a lot in LUSD schools. There's a program called Principal for the Day. So like literally you become the principal for the day, right? Speaking of school teacher. And
no easy feat.
Yeah, exactly. So I brought my son to when he was going to high school in downtown LA. I arrived with him, and one of the reveals that I have is having and seeing kids essentially on these buses, and they're not only being transported and we're the de facto school bus in many of these communities here in Los Angeles. But one experience I had was a kid essentially seeing me there and said, "Hey, Dr. Liban, you don't remember me, but you talked about your work, you talked about Metro, when you volunteered in my school, 5-6 years ago, and I want to be like you. I want to be like an engineer. I want to be like a transportation professional." And I'm the first person going to college in my family. I'm going to Cal State LA next year. I'm a senior now, and it's one of those things wherein you just do your job and you do what's best for the city and for the region, and you don't know how it's going to impact the people. And you hear stories like that from that kid coming out of nowhere, and essentially it's very refreshing and very fulfilling actually to hear those kinds of things. And the more that I try to aspire for and continually improve, what I do here at Metro for our agency and for our stakeholders. So.
I'm not going to lie, that story just gave me chills. Yeah. You just helped a kid choose a career path. Yeah, that's phenomenal. That is so great. And I love the fact that these kids are like real. Well, first of all, this upcoming generation is so much better. They know that pollution is a problem. They know that climate change is happening, and they're addressing it, which I'm so grateful that this is happening in an accelerated manner. But having said that, what can people expect from the future of LA Metro? What new things are happening?
Yeah, so a couple of fronts. I go back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the National Climate Assessment. We're talking about 4 different things there. The impacts of climate on transportation. So I'm bringing a lot of those information and lessons learned into the agency here as we transform our transportation system here in the region. The second one is reimagining transportation. There's a lot of issues now in terms of workforce development, cybersecurity. Those are issues that we have here in the agency as well. We're trying to hire as many transportation professionals here in our organization. Bus operators, we're trying to hire for them to as an entry point into the transportation world. And so on and so forth. And then third item there is co-benefits of transportation, right? So in building the system, there's a lot of co-benefits in terms of not only air quality benefits, but we talked about it earlier, health and wellness.
Yes,
we talked about some of the careers that people might not have considered. And so I'm bringing a lot of those pieces of information that I'm learning from National Climate Assessment to what we're doing here as well. And the fourth one is pretty much the trade-offs. What could be the trade-offs in electrification? There's a lot of environmental issues there that we have not been thinking about. Where the raw materials are coming from.
Yes.
Is the electricity clean? That kind of stuff. Wherein people talk about the big vision for LA, but what about the other communities where we're drawing a lot of these resources from? And putting all those pieces together, going back to your point, I really would like folks to explore Los Angeles through our transit system. Crenshaw Line is opening this fall. Regional Connector is opening as well. Regional Connector is very transformative in the sense that you can take one line from Santa Monica to East LA, 2 different communities, but connected by this rail line, right? Or from Long Beach, to Monrovia, again, 2 different communities, but connected by this line. And the Crenshaw line, it goes through the heart of the African American community. Finally, people are going to be able to explore more of our friends and brothers and sisters in that community, go to LAX, and experience more of the city that we might be hearing about.
Yeah.
But we may not really know about.
You can actually go now.
So there, so those are just some of the highlights, but and really, like what I've been trying to say there, as the Chief Sustainability Officer here, my focus is obviously my agency, but with opportunities, national opportunities of bringing new lessons, new ideas into Los Angeles. Your listeners, our stakeholders, our patrons expect, only the best of the world to be part of the system. So.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you are promoting the health and wellness, because most people, just to connect some dots for people, when you have, diesel powered engines, there's particulate matter going in the atmosphere. You're getting rid of that. So you're going to be healing communities. They're not going to be breathing that in. They're not going to be exposed to it, which is a long-term damaging effect. Getting people out of their cars, walking to the bus stop or the subway, what works. These are all healthy benefits that will only make the betterment of society.
Yep.
So I thank you for everything that you're doing. What you guys are doing at Metro is fantastic. Please keep it up. I'm a huge fan. Obviously, I could talk about this for hours, but keep doing what you're doing. You guys are fantastic. I thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy, again for inviting me here. For the opportunity to talk to your viewers, to your listeners, and I can't invite people enough. Go Metro. This is a very safe system, and I'm the face of it on the environmental and sustainability side. I hope to see you there sometime soon. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care, guys, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful day.